I never liked blind dates. They always felt like business meetings where emotions wore suits. But that evening, something in me whispered to go. Maybe because for the first time in years, I wasn't going as Jansen Cole, the billionaire everyone knew. I was just a man, tired of people wanting something from me. My friend Ryan had set it up. She's smart, genuine, and nothing like the women you meet at those charity galas, he'd said. Just go, talk, be human for once. So I did. The restaurant was tucked away in a quiet corner of the city, warm lights, piano notes melting in the background, and that faint scent of vanilla coffee that always made me nostalgic. I arrived early, as usual. Old habits from business never left me. I sat at the corner table by the window, looking out at the rain tracing paths down the glass. People outside rushed with umbrellas while I just waited, tapping my fingers against my glass of water. Then she walked in. A woman in a soft beige dress, hair cascading in waves, eyes carrying both curiosity and calm. There was something strangely familiar about her, like a melody I'd heard years ago but couldn't place. She looked around once, then smiled gently as her eyes landed on me. "Kajal?" I asked, standing up. She nodded, smiling, and for a moment I forgot the world. Her presence wasn't loud or dazzling. It was peaceful, like home after a storm. "Sorry I'm late," she said as she sat down. Traffic was a nightmare. "No worries," I smiled. "I'm usually early anyway." The waiter brought menus, but neither of us looked at them. Instead, there was this quiet pause, the kind that's not awkward, just loaded with unspoken things. "So," I began, trying to break it, "Ryan told me a bit about you, but I think I'd rather hear it from you." She laughed softly. "What did he say?" "That you're a writer, and that you have a mysterious past." Her smile faltered, just for a split second, before returning. "Writers usually do." We talked about simple things, books, travel, the city, but every time she looked at me, it felt like she was searching through me, not just at me, like she knew something I didn't. Then came the moment that changed everything. Between laughter and sips of coffee, she leaned forward slightly, her tone soft but steady. "You don't remember me, do you?" Her words hit me harder than any boardroom confrontation ever had. I blinked. "I'm sorry." She tilted her head, studying me with those knowing eyes. "You really don't." The world around us seemed to fade, the clinking glasses, the soft jazz, even the rain outside. My mind scrambled through faces, moments, cities, nothing. "I'm afraid I don't," I admitted quietly. "Should I?" She smiled again, not out of amusement, but heartbreak. "It's okay. You weren't supposed to. Back then, you were just trying to survive." Now my curiosity had completely taken over. "Back then?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at her cup, tracing her finger around its edge. "Do you ever think about the people you met before you became you? Before the suits, the interviews, the headlines?" I hesitated. "Sometimes, but most of them didn't stay long enough to remember." She lifted her gaze, eyes shimmering under the soft light. I did. Something in her voice, a tremor between forgiveness and memory, made my chest tighten. "Who are you, Kajal?" I asked quietly. She smiled faintly. "Someone you helped once, when you had nothing." Her words pulled me back, to a life buried under skyscrapers and contracts. A small diner maybe, a winter night, a boy with empty pockets and dreams too heavy to carry. I stared at her, my mind racing, heart pounding in disbelief. "Wait!" But she just shook her head gently. "Finish your coffee, Jansen. We have time. I'll remind you who you were." Her words hung in the air like a soft echo that refused to fade. "Someone you helped once, when you had nothing." That night, after dropping Kajal home, I couldn't sleep. The city lights outside my penthouse window looked colder than ever. I poured myself a glass of water and stared at my reflection, wondering what kind of man forgets the people who once mattered. I'd built empires, crushed deadlines, made billions, but I couldn't remember her. And for some reason, that hurt. The next morning, while driving to my office, a faint memory flickered. The winter rain. A rusted bridge on the city's outskirts. I could almost hear someone crying in the dark. And then it hit me. Years ago, long before the name Jansen Coal meant anything, I used to live in an abandoned storeroom near the docks. I was 21, broke, and desperate. My dream was to build a startup, some idea about eco-energy panels that nobody believed in. I worked at a mechanic's shop during the day, fixed old engines, and saved every penny. But life wasn't kind. That night I was walking home from work, drenched from the rain. I remember hearing a faint sob beneath the old St. Mark's Bridge. I almost ignored it. Until I saw her. A young girl, maybe 18, sitting alone under the bridge, hugging her knees. Her clothes were torn, her hair dripping wet. She looked terrified, but when she saw me, she tried to hide her face. "Hey," I said softly, stepping closer. "You okay?" She didn't answer, just shook her head. I could have walked away. Most people would have. But something in her trembling made me stop. I took off my old jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "Look, I don't know what happened," I said, "but no one deserves to sit out here in the rain. Come on, there's a coffee shop nearby. Warm place. No questions." She hesitated, then finally nodded. At the cafe, she barely spoke. Just sat there, holding the cup with both hands, as if afraid the warmth would leave her too. When I asked her name, she whispered, "Kajal." And that was it. We sat in silence most of the time. I didn't push her for answers. Maybe I saw too much of myself in her, someone lost, forgotten by the world. When the bill came, I realized I didn't have enough money. I was embarrassed, but the cafe owner, an old kind man named Leo, just waved it off. "You help her, son," he said. "That's enough payment tonight." That was the night I gave her my last $5, told her to buy food and find a place to stay. She promised she would. Then she looked at me with those same eyes I saw last night, full of gratitude and something unspoken. "I won't forget you," she'd said softly, before walking away into the rain. And somehow, I believed her. Back in the present, sitting in my office surrounded by glass and silence, I realized she didn't forget. But I did. That evening I called her. She answered after 2 rings. "You remembered," she said, her voice calm but warm. "I think I do," I admitted. "The bridge, the cafe, you in that rain." There was a soft laugh on the other end. "Took you long enough, Mr. Billionaire." "I wasn't a billionaire then," I said quietly. "No," she replied. "You were better. You were kind." Her words cut deeper than she knew. Years in business had made me ruthless, calculating. I had turned compassion into contracts and warmth into transactions. "I never got to ask," I said. "What happened to you that night? Why were you under that bridge?" Silence, then a breath. "Because I had nowhere else to go. My father died. My relatives took everything. I was just trying to survive, but you—" Her voice cracked slightly. "You gave me hope." I leaned back, eyes closed. For a moment, I wasn't Jansen Cole, the man on magazine covers. I was that soaked, broke mechanic again, giving away his last $5 to a stranger. "Where did you go after that?" I asked. "I left the city," she said. "Got a small job at a library. Worked, studied, grew. But I never forgot your words. My words." She smiled softly. "You told me that night. One day, when we're both standing tall, we'll meet again. Not as survivors, but as equals." I exhaled slowly. "I actually said that." "You did," she laughed gently. "You even tried to make it sound wise." I couldn't help but chuckle. "Sounds like me." Then her tone softened again. And that's why I came to that blind date, Jansen. Not because Ryan set it up, because I knew it was you. My heart froze. You knew? Yes, she said. Ryan's friend? The billionaire who once worked as a mechanic? I connected the dots. I just wanted to see if you'd remember the boy who saved me once. I swallowed hard, words failing me. So now what? I asked quietly. Now? She said, her voice steady. Now I remind you what you used to believe in. Before money, before fame. And for the first time in years, I felt something stir inside me. Not ambition, not ego, but a strange, aching hope. Maybe this wasn't a blind date after all. Maybe it was destiny knocking again, wearing a beige dress and a forgiving smile. When Kayal said she wanted to remind me who I was, I didn't expect her to mean it literally. 2 days later, she texted me an address. No words, just a location pin. When I opened it, my heart stuttered. It was the same cafe, Leo's Cafe. The tiny corner place under the old St. Mark's Bridge. The place where I had once handed over my last $5 and walked away without expecting anything in return. The next evening, my car rolled slowly into the narrow lane. Everything looked smaller now. The cracked walls, the flickering yellow lights, even the bridge itself. Maybe success makes the world shrink around you. I stepped out, half expecting the place to be gone. But there it was. The sign, faded and old, still said, Leo's Cafe. I pushed the door open, and the smell hit me. Coffee, cinnamon, and something achingly familiar. Hope. Kajal was already there, sitting at the same table where she had once clutched that steaming cup all those years ago. When she saw me, she smiled. You came. I nodded. Couldn't resist nostalgia. She looked around the cafe with soft eyes. You know, after that night, Leo gave me a part-time job here. I used to wipe tables and serve coffee until I saved enough for my studies. I blinked. Here? She nodded. Right here. Every corner of this place has your echo. Her words hit deep. I hadn't yet realized my small act of kindness had rooted itself into someone's life so profoundly. The same old man, Leo, came out from the kitchen, older now, slower, but when he saw me, his eyes widened. Well, I'll be damned, he laughed, if it isn't that broke kid who used to fix engines and dream big. I couldn't help but grin. You remember? How could I forget? You gave away your coat and your last few bucks that night. I told my wife, that boy's either crazy or destined for something great. Kajal smiled knowingly. Seems you were right, Leo. He chuckled, patting my shoulder. You did good, son. Real good. When he left us alone, there was a long pause between me and Kajal. I looked at her and said softly, You really planned this, didn't you? She shrugged playfully. Let's just say, fate needed a little push. Why bring me here? I asked. To remind me I used to be poor? Her eyes softened. No, to remind you that back then you had nothing, and yet you gave everything. You weren't afraid to feel. But somewhere along the way, Jansen, you stopped. Her words stung because they were true. Success had made me invincible on paper, but hollow inside. Every handshake was a contract, every smile a calculation. I'd traded sincerity for survival. She leaned in slightly. You built towers that touched the sky, but you forgot the ground that carried you. I exhaled, staring into my untouched coffee. You sound like a poet. Maybe, she said softly. Or maybe just someone who still remembers the rain. I looked up, meeting her gaze. There it was again, that mixture of forgiveness and strength that once saved me from giving up. You know, I said, voice low, that night, I gave you my last $5. It wasn't charity. It was me trying to believe that kindness could still mean something. She smiled gently. And it did. You helped me believe too. Outside, the rain started again, like fate replaying its own scene. Kajal stood and motioned toward the door. Come, I want to show you something. We walked under the bridge, just like before. The same echo of raindrops, the same hum of traffic above, but now everything felt different. Older, wiser. She stopped at the spot where she once sat, shivering. This is where my life changed, she said softly. Not because you gave me money, but because you looked at me like I mattered. Her voice trembled slightly. You didn't even know my name, Jansen. Yet you saw me. I swallowed hard, emotions tightening my throat. And now look at you, I whispered. You turned pain into poetry. She smiled faintly. And you turned dreams into steel. For a moment, we just stood there in silence, two souls who had taken different roads, only to meet again at the same bridge. Then she said something that shook me again. I didn't ask you here to make you feel guilty, Jansen. I asked you here because you once said, when we both stand tall, we'll meet as equals. I think today's that day. I looked at her, really looked at her. Not the dress, not the smile, but the strength behind it. You built a life for yourself, I said softly. Without anyone's help. She nodded. And you built an empire. But maybe both of us forgot that life isn't meant to be built alone. Her eyes glistened under the streetlight. You once saved me from the rain, Jansen. Maybe now it's my turn to save you from your storm. That night, as I dropped her home again, I didn't say much. But her words wouldn't stop echoing in my head. You forgot the ground that carried you. And maybe, for the first time in years, I realized she wasn't just a girl from my past. She was the mirror I'd been avoiding all along. A few days after our meeting at the cafe, I invited Kajal to my office. It wasn't planned. I just wanted her to see the life I'd built. The one everyone admired, yet no one truly understood. When the elevator doors opened to the 51st floor, she stepped out, her eyes widening slightly at the glass walls, the skyline stretching endlessly behind them. So this is where the magic happens, she said softly. Magic, I repeated with a faint smile. That's one word for it. Rows of assistants walked briskly through polished corridors, their faces buried in phones and laptops. The air smelled like success and exhaustion. Kajal's eyes scanned the room, pausing at the massive window overlooking the city. It's beautiful, she said, but cold. I chuckled. It's air-conditioned. She didn't laugh. That's not what I meant. And I knew she wasn't wrong. To everyone else, my office was a symbol of power, a fortress of glass and marble. But to me, it was a golden cage. Every wall reflected my achievements, and yet none of them reflected me. I led her to my private meeting room. On the wall hung photographs of award ceremonies, magazine covers, and charity events. She stopped at one, an image of me shaking hands with a government official. You smile, she said, but your eyes look tired. I exhaled softly. Maybe because they are. We sat down. My assistant brought us coffee, but Kajal barely touched hers. She just looked at me with that quiet, piercing gaze that always made me uneasy. Not because it judged, but because it saw. Why are you showing me all this, Jansen? She asked. Maybe I want you to know that your faith wasn't wasted, I replied. You believed in a stranger once, and he turned out okay. She smiled faintly. You turned out successful. But okay? I'm not so sure. Her words hit harder than I expected. Do you have anyone you trust? She asked softly. I hesitated. Trust doesn't exist in my world, Kajal. People smile until the ink dries. She sighed. You sound like someone who's been betrayed. I looked away. More than once. There was a long silence. The city shimmered outside the glass, but inside the air grew heavy. Finally, she stood and walked toward the window. You built towers, Jansen, but you forgot to build a home. I frowned. A home? Yes, she said. A place where someone waits for you, not your money. Her words stirred something raw inside me. Memories of nights spent alone in my mansion. The sound of silence echoing louder than applause. Maybe I stopped believing such a place exists, I said quietly. She turned, smiling gently. Then maybe it's time you start again. A few hours later, after she left, I walked through my office halls. The same people nodded, smiled, and congratulated me for things I barely remembered doing. But that night, her words wouldn't leave my head. A place where someone waits for you, not your money. At midnight, I drove home, to my mansion, where every room echoed with emptiness. I passed the endless marble hallways, the art pieces, the glass chandeliers, all bought, all lifeless. I stopped at the balcony, overlooking the city lights. It was beautiful and meaningless. For the first time in years, I admitted something to myself. I wasn't living. I was performing. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. Kajal was already there, sitting by the window reading something. "How did you get in?" I asked, surprised. She smiled mischievously. "Your receptionist likes poetry. I read her some." I laughed for the first time in weeks. Then she handed me a small folder. "These are your company's charity projects. The real ones, not the PR stunts." I went through the reports. I raised an eyebrow. And you're helping hundreds of schools and hospitals without even realizing it." "But you never visit them." I frowned. "That's what my team's for." She shook her head. "No, Jansen. That's what your heart was for." Her words lingered in the air like truth I'd been running from. "Come with me," she said suddenly. "Where?" "You'll see." 2 hours later, we stood outside a small orphanage, one that my foundation had funded years ago. The building was painted in bright colors, with children's laughter echoing from the courtyard. The head caretaker recognized me immediately, almost tearing up as she greeted us. "Sir, you came. The kids talk about you all the time." I froze. "They talk about me?" "Yes," she said, smiling. "They have your picture in the classroom. They say, 'He's the man who built us a home.'" Something inside me broke then, quietly, beautifully. Kajal knelt beside a group of children drawing on the ground. One of the little girls looked up at me shyly. "Are you the man from the picture?" I nodded, kneeling beside her. "I guess I am." She grinned and handed me a crayon, then helped me finish the rainbow. I took it, and as I drew beside her, I realized this was what I'd been missing. The simplicity, the realness, the warmth of being needed, not admired. When we left, Kajal didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her eyes said it all. "Welcome back to yourself." That night, I sent a message to my board. "Tomorrow's meeting is cancelled. I'll be out visiting the real assets of this company, the people." For once, it felt right. The next few weeks were different. For the first time in years, my calendar wasn't filled with investor calls or press conferences. Instead, I was visiting schools, hospitals, orphanages, places that carried my name but never my presence. And every single time, Kajal was there. She didn't just stand beside me like an assistant or a guest. She belonged there, laughing with the children, listening to old women's stories, talking to janitors like they were CEOs. Every place we visited, people remembered her smile more than my speech. And for once, I didn't mind. In fact, I realized something quietly terrifying. I'd fallen for her, not for her beauty or her kindness, or even the fact that she once saved me from my own arrogance, but because she made me feel human again. One afternoon, we were at a small rural school I'd sponsored years ago. The children had made a banner that said, "Thank you, Mr. Jansen and Miss Kajal." We stood there, laughing with the kids, when one of them, a little boy with messy hair, looked up at Kajal and asked, "Are you his wife?" She froze. So did I. The children giggled, and Kajal quickly smiled, shaking her head. No, sweetheart, just a friend. But I could see something in her eyes change, a flicker of distance. Later that day, when we drove back to the city, she was unusually quiet. The laughter was gone, replaced by silence thick enough to feel. "What's wrong?" I asked finally. "Nothing," she said softly. "Just thinking." "Kajal," I said firmly, "you don't do nothing. Talk to me." She stared out the window, her reflection shimmering against the city lights. "Jansen, have you ever wondered why life brings certain people back only for a while?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" She turned to face me. Her eyes looked heavy, like they carried a secret too painful to keep. "Because maybe their purpose in your life isn't a tea to stay, but to wake you up." Something cold ran down my spine. "What are you saying?" She smiled faintly. "I think my part in your story is over." "Over?" I said sharply. "You think you can just walk away after turning my life upside down?" Her tone was calm, but her voice trembled. "You don't need me anymore, Jansen. You found yourself again. That was the whole point." I gripped the steering wheel tightly. "No, the point was us, you and me, together." She looked down. "You're forgetting something. We come from different worlds." "Don't," I said. "Not that excuse." She sighed. "It's not an excuse, it's reality. You belong to headlines, meetings, and skyscrapers. I belong to bridges, books, and quiet cafes." My voice cracked. "I can belong anywhere, Kajal, as long as it's with you." For a moment, her mask almost broke. But then she whispered, "You deserve someone unbroken, Jansen." I pulled the car over, turning to her. "Don't do this, not now." Her eyes shimmered, but she stayed silent. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small, folded paper. "This was the letter I wrote that night under the bridge," she said. "I never gave it to you." I unfolded it. The paper was old, creased, stained by rain, but the words were still there. "To the stranger who gave me his coat and his kindness, I don't know your name, but you've given me a reason to keep living. Someday, if fate is kind, I'll return this kindness. Until then, I'll carry your hope with me." My chest tightened. "You did return it, Kajal. You returned more than I ever gave." She smiled sadly. "Then let me go with peace." "No," I whispered. "Not this time." But before I could say more, her phone buzzed. She looked at it and sighed. "My train leaves in 2 hours." "Train?" She nodded softly. "There's a teaching job in another city, a small village school that needs me. I already said yes." I stared at her in disbelief. "Without telling me?" "It was never about us, Jansen," she said quietly. "It was about you. You were lost, and I just showed you the map." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "And what about you, Kajal? Who shows you the way?" Her lips quivered, and for the first time her composure cracked. "Maybe some people don't get rescued twice." I reached out and held her hand tightly. "Then I'll make sure you don't have to be rescued again." She tried to pull away, but I didn't let go. "You think fate brought you back to leave me again?" I said. "No, Kajal. It brought you back because it's our turn to start living. Together." For a long moment, she just looked at me, torn between reason and emotion, past and possibility. Then she whispered, "Don't make this harder than it already is." And before I could stop her, she opened the door, stepped out into the night, and disappeared into the rain, just like the first time. I sat there for hours, the rain drumming softly against the windshield, her letter still trembling in my hand. All the money, the fame, the power, none of it could buy the only thing I wanted now. A second chance with the woman who reminded me what it meant to be human. For weeks after Kajal left, I became a ghost in my own house. The mansion felt bigger, emptier, colder, like every room echoed with her laughter that wasn't there anymore. The staff stopped asking where she went. My assistant stopped scheduling meetings. Even my driver started keeping tissues in the car, because sometimes I'd just drive for hours with no destination. And every night, I'd unfold her letter and read it again. That one line, "If fate is kind, I'll return this kindness," haunted me. Because this time, fate wasn't kind. One morning I stood in front of the mirror and didn't recognize myself. The man staring back wasn't the billionaire Jansen everyone admired. He was just a man who had everything, except the one woman who made it all worth it. That's when I made my decision. I told my board of directors I was taking a leave. Indefinite. They panicked. I didn't care. For the first time, I was chasing something that couldn't be bought. A person who had already given me more than I deserved. It took me 2 days to find her. A friend from the foundation told me she'd joined a small school in a remote village by the hills. The road there was narrow, the journey long. But when I reached, I saw a sight I'll never forget. Children sat on the floor of a tiny classroom, laughing as Kajal drew pictures on the blackboard with colored chalk. She looked radiant, simple white kurta, hair tied back, sunlight falling on her face. And even from a distance I could see it. She was happy, but something inside me whispered, "She still misses you." I stepped closer, quietly, until one of the kids noticed me. "Miss Kajal, someone's here." She turned and froze. For a few seconds, the entire room fell silent. Then the chalk slipped from her hand. "Jansen?" she whispered, almost afraid to believe it. I smiled, though my voice cracked. "You didn't think you'd get rid of me that easily, did you?" The kids giggled. Kajal blinked, trying to compose herself. "What are you doing here?" "I came to return something," I said softly, walking toward her. I pulled out the old folded letter, now creased but carefully kept. "You gave me this once. It saved me. Now I'm here to give you something in return." She frowned, her lips trembling. "What could you possibly—" Before she could finish, I took a deep breath. "A promise." I knelt slightly, holding her gaze. "You told me maybe some people don't get rescued twice. Well, I'm not leaving until you realize you already saved me twice, Kajal. The first time under that bridge, and the second time, when you taught me what a real life looks like." Her eyes shimmered. "Jansen, please." "No," I said, my voice breaking. "You don't get to walk away again. Because this time, I'm the one asking for a second chance." The children watched silently, wide-eyed. Kajal covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now. "I don't belong in your world," she whispered. "Then I'll make a new one," I said simply. "One where you can teach, laugh, help, and I'll stand right beside you. Not as a billionaire, not as your past, just as a man who finally learned how to love." For a long, fragile moment, she didn't move. Then she stepped forward slowly and whispered, "You really didn't remember me that night at the restaurant, did you?" I shook my head. "No, but I'll never forget you again." Her soft laugh broke into a sob as she wrapped her arms around me. The children clapped and cheered. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. Months later, that little school became something more. We rebuilt it. New classrooms, books, playgrounds. Kajal continued teaching, and I started a foundation in her name, the Kajal Hope Initiative. She never liked the attention, but I told her, "It's not attention, it's gratitude." And every evening after the children left, we'd sit under the old banyan tree behind the school, sipping tea from clay cups as the sun disappeared behind the hills. Sometimes she'd rest her head on my shoulder and whisper, "You still think fate brought us together?" And I'd smile. "No, Kajal, you did." "Oh." One night, while we watched the stars, she said quietly, "You know, that night under the bridge, when you handed me your coat, I didn't even see your face clearly. But I remembered your voice. It had pain, but also kindness. And I promised myself if I ever met you again, I'd remind you what kindness feels like. I looked at her, heart full. Then maybe you should know. You kept that promise. She smiled, eyes glistening with tears. And you kept yours. I frowned. Which one? Her voice trembled. You said you'd find me again. I laughed softly, pulling her close. And I did. The night fell quiet, except for the wind whispering through the trees. And for the first time, the world felt small enough to fit right there, between her heartbeat and mine. Years later, whenever journalists asked how my life changed, I'd smile and say, "It all started with a blind date." They'd laugh, thinking it was a joke. But I'd look at Kajal, across the room, still laughing with the children, still teaching hearts how to hope, and think to myself, it wasn't just a blind date. It was fate opening my eyes.